course, one of the most overriding aspects that can lead us into a prominently consumer-oriented energy policy is the health and safety. Years ago, when people grumbled about their electric utility, it was primarily economic. If they didn't do anything, they might received higher rates. Now, if we don't do anything, we get environmental devastation, not just the more traditional types of offshore spills or of coal being burned under uncontrolled conditions, but the real awesome risk, which is nuclear fission. Here we're dealing with issues that can only be called survival for large portions of the country which might be subjected to a nuclear fission catastrophe. Here we're dealing with a technology that is going to be deployed in the form of 1,000 plants by the year 2000. There are now 44 operating in this country. A technology that has to be perfect forever, or the alternative is catastrophe. There's been no technology that has not had in one or more of its parts a maximum credible accident in the history of the world. Cars crash, planes crash, the Titanic sunk, the space race has had maximum credible accidents, both in the Soviet Union and in the United States. And this is an area where no expense is spared, where the goal is zero defect, where the controls are heavily in the hands of a highly disciplined technocrat, unlike nuclear power, which is diffusing throughout the country in the hands of the utilities, who are highly high technology experts. The utilities who've never done any research and development. Consolidated Edison in New York, its principal innovation in the last quarter century has been to paint its smokestacks red, white, and blue. The utilities. We have a diffusion in the transportation area where deadly radioactive wastes that have to be contained from humanity for over 250,000 years. So deadly are they, such as plutonium-239 and its cancer-causing potency. They are transported by trucks and by rail, really reliable forms of surface transportation, subject to sabotage or theft of weapons-grade material. Trucks are hijacked all the time. They don't even bear a news item, it's so frequent. Then the waste disposal centers. And who runs them? For example, Atlantic Richfield. Isn't that reassuring? Atlantic Richfield, the same company that spilled tons and tons and tons of oil in the ocean. Well, we have a system where nuclear power is said to be infinitely safe by the Atomic Energy Commission. Why haven't they recently even told us that the probability of a major accident is lower than they ever thought it was? It's now 1 out of 1 billion. And I've heard estimates that it's going to soon be 1 out of 10 billion. Why not 1 out of 1 trillion? If it's so safe, why isn't it insurable? If these nuclear plants are so safe, why can't they be insured under any premium or insurance pool system? The private insurance companies have managed to insure these nuclear power plants to 1/4 of 1% of their potential damage. That's not very ambitious. When the utilities went to Congress in 1956, they said, we're not operating any nuclear plants unless we get limited liability. Congress said, fine. They passed the Price-Anderson Act, 1957, limiting liability to $560 million from a major accident. That's a fraction of 1% of the potential damage, which even the AEC estimated in a study in 1965, which was suppressed until last year when it was disclosed under threat of court action, that a big nuclear accident, this is 1965 figures, when the plants were smaller, 45,000 dead, over 100,000 serious cases of radiation poisoning, $17 billion worth of property damage, an area the size of Pennsylvania contaminated. For example, if one occurred on the shores of Lake Michigan, you could forget about Lake Michigan waters being used for over 100 years. And untold damage to future generations. Those are modest figures compared to today. The plants are bigger, there's inflation, and many of them are near major cities. 26 miles north of New York, there are 2 nuclear power plants, one small, one large, another one being built. Should there be, by accident, by sabotage, or by a natural force, whether it's earthquake or tornado or what have you, should there be a failure of the primary and secondary water systems that cool the hot reactor core, and the deadly meltdown occurs, and 20% of this radioactive material in these nuclear reactors, which are at a volume equivalent to 2,000 Hiroshima-sized weapons radioactive material, if 20% of that volume is gaseous, as is believed to be the case, and a radioactive cloud comes up from the plant and heads toward New York City, you've got the greatest disaster in human history, short of obviously some of the major disastrous floods in China or India. You have much more than 45,000 fatalities. You have a Holocaust. You have a situation where technological arrogance and corporate and governmental investment in the billions refuse to recognize that they have made a terrible mistake. It is a parallel with Vietnam of uncanny similarity. This is our technological Vietnam. The difference is that the potential victims are not in South Vietnam. They're right here in the United States. David Halberstam could have written a book on the nuclear power situation and called it the best and the brightest. The same type of bland assurances that everything is okay, the same cover-up, the same messianic type approach that we're going to provide the U.S. with cheap, inexhaustible energy that's safe, the same assurances that the problems having been uncovered by the public will be solved, the same type of probability counts. That's what's been going on. Nuclear power can be stopped within 5 years at most if people simply inform themselves of the facts and resolve to take some sort of interest. First of all, the nuclear power technology is crumbling of its own weight. At any given time, 1/3 of the plants are shut down for repairs. Second of all, the costs are going to skyrocket. There wasn't an energy shortage in the last 6 months, but you can't believe what a uranium shortage is going to be, which is going to start in about 3 to 4 years. They don't have enough uranium, either abroad or here. Talking about self-sufficiency, they're going to have to rely more and more on abroad for uranium supplies. By the 1980s, it's going to be critical. The costs are going to skyrocket. And we have an economy reliant on nuclear energy when we can't get uranium. Number 3, nuclear technology has one bite of the apple. That's all. If there's one big disaster in one of the plants and we lose a Cleveland or a Pittsburgh, then the people are not going to tolerate this technology. Then they're going to have to be faced with a cruel choice. Either keep the economy going at high pitch and tolerate another potential disaster, or shut them down, with the consequences to an energy reduction obvious. That's no choice that any group of people should ever be confronted with. The time to stop is now. $30 billion of the taxpayers' money, plus billions of dollars of the ratepayers' money for 20 years, and what do we have? We have nuclear power, which gives a little more energy to our economy than wood does at the present time. A little over 1.4% and about 5.6% of the electricity. And there is nothing more than trouble from year to year as this technology shows that its intricacy, its potential danger, its diffusion throughout the society into less and less skilled hands is such that it is beyond the realm of rational technological management. It's technical hubris par excellence. Just imagine what our response is to future generations. We are saying to future generations, thousands of years in the future, that in order to power our air conditioners, in order to power our society, for 50 years we're going to go into nuclear fission, which is about the cycle of that technology, and bequeath the legacy of stored and unstored radioactivity of deadly proportions. What if the ancient Egyptians during the pyramids did that? What if they saddled the earth with that kind of radioactivity for a 50-year utilization period? To saddle the earth for 250,000 years. It isn't just a storage problem. We've already seen that 500,000 gallons of deadly radioactive waste have leaked in Richland, Washington, right through the tanks into the ground, 250 feet below the water table, then the Columbia River. The bottom of the Columbia River is thick with radioactivity. Of course, the government says that they'll never go to the water table. You know, all those plutonium-239s and cesium-137s, they're going to obey the AEC for 250,000 years. But beyond that, every day there are leaks of radioactive material. There's low-level radioactive emissions. There is the kind of dumping in rivers and streams that various fuel processing plants have been accused of doing by the Atomic Energy Commission itself. There is the factor where we rely on the utilities to report to the government when they have leaked radioactive material greater than permissible levels. The perpetrators have to blow the whistle on themselves. How reassuring. In the Palisades plant in Michigan, where we have obtained internal memos proving the point, the company refused to report to the AEC very substantial emissions. At one point, when they were squiring around visitors from the locality to show them how safe the plant was, the visitors never knew what hit them. When you're dealing with a silent form of violence that has a cumulative impact rather than an immediate impact, when you're dealing with a form of violence that you can't see, touch, smell, or taste, you're dealing with a process that has transcended our physiological alert systems. We're obsolete physiologically to deal with that kind of alert system. We have got to deal with prevention, foresee, forestall these impacts from occurring. We can't wait until thousands of people drop dead in New York shouting it was cesium-137 20 years ago. It's not going to happen. So in looking at the alternatives for energy, nuclear fission must be stopped, and it will be. The citizen groups that are going up around the country, the citizen groups against nuclear fission that are developing around the country are developing faster than any other domestic issue I've ever seen. They include Democrats, Republicans, liberals, moderates, radicals, conservatives, older people, younger people. It doesn't make any difference. They're all in the population at risk, and they know it. And they're growing, and they're becoming more skilled, and they're becoming more strategic. And this government in Washington and the utilities, they don't think it's going to happen. They think they can run the public into the ground just like any other rate increase, you know? You ask for 40%, you want to settle for 20, you get 20%, you get a few irate letters, and you wear them down. They can't be persuaded that this movement against nuclear power is not going to be stopped. It's like Vietnam again. Only in this case, the peasants are us. We're the peasants. We're the serfs. We're the people who never questioned this technology while it was building up for 10 years. We're the people who believed what the AEC and the utilities were telling us. It was an enormously tight and prevaricatory performance on their part. They lied. They lied meticulously. They lied in detail. They lied persistently, and they're still lying. The Atomic Energy Commissioners hiding behind their government immunities are cowards. They don't want to debate in public. The utility companies don't want to debate in public. They're cowards too. They can't stand the debate. If you had an Atomic Energy Commission standing here listening to their arguments, you could see them crumble one after the other. Nobody in the nuclear advocacy arena is willing to say to the following question: since you advocate nuclear power, would you advocate it if you believe that there is going to be just one nuclear power plant accident in the next 40 years? Big accident. There isn't anybody that has the nerve to say yes. They all say no. What they're telling us is that they believe it'll never happen. This is nonsense. There have been so many near misses in the recent past. They almost had a big accident 30 miles south of Detroit in the Fermi reactor, which they caught in the nick of time, after which one engineer was heard to say, "My God, we almost lost Detroit."